Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Boss versus Coach. Last week, we made the announcement of our book being on Amazon for pre-orders, and I must say and thank you all for the encouragement and support that has been shown in terms of the orders that have been made for the book. The curiosity and the support also gives a lot of motivation to me and Olivia that we are on the right track and that this book is something which will be welcomed by the society at large. We look forward to your feedback once you have the book, read through, and let us know if that inspires you, if that puts you with the thoughts to transform yourself as a better leader, and also shows you the way which you would like to travel. So, on that note, I would like to start with today's podcast. Change is relentless, uncertainty is unending, but how we lead through it determines whether we are there to thrive or merely survive. Tonight, we are going to touch upon the very important topic that tests the true leadership. Leadership not when things are going smooth, leadership not when you are going as per plans, but leadership when the grounds beneath is shifting. Leadership when your plans are derailing, and leadership when you are entering into the era of uncertainty. So we are going to talk about leading through uncertainty and how does this phase distinguishes a coach from a boss. Olivia, your initial thoughts on this?
Well, for quite some time, people have been talking about us living in a VUCA world, VUCA standing for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That phrase actually started with the military in the Gulf War when they realized that the old fashioned ways of doing things just weren't happening. The world is full of changing paradigms and technology has changed everything, but also thought processes have. And actually, over the last few years, don't know quite how long now, they've been talking about being in a Barney world. So that's to be brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. So that just speaks to the fact that our whole environment now speaks to uncertainty almost as the only constant. We never quite know what's happening. It's hard to know if you pull a lever here, what's the effect somewhere else. So I think it's something that leaders just have to get used to and have to find a really strong way to navigate. And no surprise to you or anyone in the audience there, that we believe that being flexible, having a coaching mindset, being open to change and being able to pivot is really the strongest skill set that a leader can have. So excited to see where this podcast takes us on that.
Absolutely. And I think we have touched upon this relevant topic in our book as well. So once the book is out, encouraging viewers to go through it and see what fresh insights you can get in leading through uncertain times. On that note, it's time to welcome our distinguished guests tonight, and we have got two very special guests. I would like Olivia to introduce our first guest on the show.
Yeah, so welcome to Melanie Roberts. Melanie's someone I've known for quite some time. She is a lecturer in leadership and strategy and has a strong corporate background with sales, business development, and strategy. So delighted to have you here, Melanie. And I know that recently you've been becoming quite the person in the academic world in terms of lecturing and working. So do you want to tell us a bit more about you and what you're bringing to our space?
Thank you so much. And thank you for this invitation, Mohit and Olivia, and congratulations on the book. So at the moment, I'm doing a lot of work in my own business, which is Behind the Lines, which is leadership training and management consultancy. So in my own business, working with companies who are going, strangely enough, through times of incredible uncertainty. So working with media companies, tech companies, who are all finding that AI is moving much faster than they'd anticipated. Markets are changing or disappearing. Value propositions don't work anymore. So it's been a really exciting and difficult time for a lot of clients. And lots of opportunities as well that are emerging. And yes, on the lecturing side, I am so lucky to be able to work with some amazing business schools and universities. And I get to meet some people who are right at the front line in terms of how business is changing at the minute as well. So thank you. Thank you again for this invitation to join you tonight.
Thanks and welcome to the show. And let me introduce our special guest tonight, the second guest tonight, our own very familiar, the resilient coach, Vandana Bulal. Vandana has been to this show before. Vandana is an ICF certified coach and has been doing incredible work in the field of coaching and mentorship. I would like Vandana to introduce herself once more for our viewers to know.
Thank you, Mohit, and Olivia as well. Thank you for having me back. I'm excited to have this conversation. So at the moment, I'm that resilience coach, and my focus is leadership and resilience solutions, right? So with the coaching aspect of my business, a lot of the focus at the moment is around the harder conversations underpinning leadership, right? There's a person behind the promise. And so typically the conversations I've been having around leadership include topics like fear, like what does it mean to communicate better, even though you've had a degree of success doing the same thing? How do you shift outside of that? How do you deal with rest and burnout? So a lot of these conversations underpin what leadership means today, and what leadership means in the context of uncertainty. So the resilience, as you know, is a topic I'm very passionate about, but everything that is adjacent to that feeds into it as well. And I'm excited to share what I can today with you guys.
Welcome to the show. So let's go on with the discussion tonight. Vandana, what according to you is the hardest thing in terms of leading through the uncertain times?
So I think when we talk about uncertainty, like Olivia mentioned, it's not a new idea, right? That change is the only constant, that things evolve. But I think we currently exist in an environment where the nature of change is so rapid and so complex, that the environment in which leadership is required to operate is challenging even those parameters that we might be more comfortable with. So I think that the very first thing to take stock of is, one, complexity is such that there is not one single person who has all of the answers. And I think that is one of the bigger boss versus coach kind of things to just accept, because bosses have all the answers. Bosses know what to do. But today's successful boss does not have all the answers anymore. Today's successful boss has to, be able to rely on a team, be able to source the right information, be able to listen, right? Be able to see their own organization with fresh eyes. And that's a very difficult human skill to do. I think for me, it's all about what does it take for you personally, for us personally, right? To step outside of what we think we know. And for me, that is the hardest thing. If you have to talk about what is, there's a quote that I really like about Chris. So it's from Chris Doris, right? And he talks about mental toughness. And so he's quoted something along the lines of, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Suffering comes from judging the pain as bad. So if you kind of put that in the context of change and uncertainty, right? Pain is inevitable, change is inevitable, suffering is optional, right? So if you kind of learn to see change or even uncertainty as part of the process, that is one of the biggest challenges I think that people get stuck with.
Can I jump in? I absolutely love that, Vandana. That is such a, it's such an authentic way of looking at how we really are as leaders. And the people I'm speaking to at the moment, they never signed up for this. They were very good technical people or very good financial people, and they got promoted and they became managers, and then eventually they earned a seat on the board. But they did not sign up to have this great insight into other human beings, to be incredibly emotionally intelligent. And I'm finding a lot of people thinking, how did I land in this position? And what does it mean? How am I suddenly expected to be exceptional at all of these skills when honestly, I'm just a really brilliant software engineer? Are you dealing with people like this as well, Vandana? Is this your experience?
Absolutely. That's exactly the crux of the issue. But I'm maybe one step removed as well from the coaching perspective, where for someone to seek out coaching, you have to admit or acknowledge to yourself that, you know what, I've been really good at this, but I can still do with some help. I still need some assistance. And a lot of leaders, I think, are stuck in the space where they just don't think they need help, or
Mm.
they don't operate in environments where asking for help is normalized. And I say help in it can be anything, right? How do I give better feedback? How do I challenge myself more? How do I learn to like, how do I shift my thinking? How do I learn a new skill? It can be anything. But people are not they often don't reconcile with the idea that what's gotten me so far is not going to serve me any longer. And by the time that you get to the top, it's a very lonely place to be. So it's all the harder, and so one of the things that I kind of like to think about is, when you're confronted with very fast-paced change, the antidote is not to be adaptable, to be more adaptable, to change, as like to kind of face the changes faster in a more intense way. I feel like the antidote to that is humility and ongoing learning. So if you take on the approach that I don't know everything, and come a point I will have questions, it's a small shift, right? But it makes it so much more fundamentally easy to bridge those gaps.
Mm.
So, Olivia, I heard Melanie and Vandana mentioned that bosses today or coaches today are not expected to have all the answers. But when we talk about uncertainty and we talk about times where it's all unseen and there's curiosity, anxiety amongst the teams, and they look forward to their coaches or their bosses to have answers to their anxiety, their curiosities, their confusions. How can a leader demonstrate the right character of leading through, even while having not all the answers with himself?
Well, I think it's interesting. It's about what do we want from a leader? And I always do this, but if you look at anthropology, if you look back in time, what we understand about humans is when things are calm and settled, we don't really need a leader. We're happy to be in a more of a lower, flatter hierarchy. But change and fear creates a need for a leader. They want someone to take the lead. So how does that work? Well, I think it's about having a vision. I think it's about having a purpose. I think it's about having a direction. That doesn't mean that you have to understand every step of the way. One of my favorite quotes is from Eisenhower, who talked about to have a plan is fatal, but planning is everything. So there's something about knowing the direction, the trajectory you want to take your people on, and then being really good at getting them to help you get there. So to what Vandana was saying, it's not about having all of the answers. And that can feel pretty scary as a leader, I think. I think there's a lot of pressure on a leader to be able to step up and say, this way, this is what we're doing. But I think if you are the person who can say, this is the ultimate direction, now, who's good at what? Let's find the delegation space. Let's find the ways that we get there together. So it isn't just the brave leader charging off and everyone following them, so much as that brave leader holding everyone together and using the best resources that they have. And to your point, Vandana, this is all new stuff. And Melanie was saying it as well. I didn't sign up for this. I didn't, I thought I was just going to be the one with the brilliant ideas and just send everyone off to do the work. It's just not an idea that's going to work anymore. So I think it is about having the humility of being able to admit what you don't know, but also the strength and purpose to know the direction that you believe to be right to go in.
So it is said, Vandana, that resilient leaders are not born, but they are built. What habits or what shift in mindset do you recommend for a leader to stay strong on the face of uncertainty and difficult times?
I love this question, Mohit, and I could talk about this for another 5 hours. um, I think the definition of strength is something that has to be weighed carefully because there's this traditional expectation that strong means authoritarian, right? But one of the big questions that repeatedly that I see with some of my clients who at the head of their companies is um, what does what is the space of humility or what is the space of gentleness in my role? It's not relevant to me, right? So I think what is the definition of strong leadership is something to pay attention to, and I fully agree that it'll change based on context. Sometimes you are faced with such urgency that you don't have the time to to be softer, right? There's a balance, I think. But when it comes to resilience, that if there's one mindset shift that I would 100%, um, and this is not just for leaders, right? This is for anyone facing a challenging situation. Resilience is only built in the face of adversity. So you can't really call yourself resilient unless you've gone through something that has tested your resilience. And it's not, I have this beautiful definition of resilience from one of my clients. I'm just going to pull this out for you. Okay. I'd always thought that resilience is equal to bouncing back with the same gusto, energy, enthusiasm after life kicks you down. But I'm realizing it's more about how we deal with the fallout and not scrambling to find normalcy again. So I like that for two reasons. One is it's not about being in a hurry. I think one of the key skills of good leaders today is to be able to use their time effectively and being able to kind of balance where you take a step back and where you push harder, you go faster, because the environment doesn't allow you to, it doesn't enable for you to do that. You have to create that for yourself. And the second thing is if you see whatever adversity you are confronted with, whatever challenges you have as just part of the process, as opposed to the big bad, it helps you to, it opens up more options for you. And Melanie, I don't know if that's the kind of thing that you see maybe when you're also consulting, that there's some people separate themselves from the practical challenges and they think that there's nothing that I can bring that is going to change the situation.
Yeah, totally. And this idea of cognitive control, how in control do I perceive myself to be? And this is where the real stress happens, is when there's a feeling that this is just rolling out of control so fast and it's completely separated from what you're actually capable of doing or achieving. And it's back to this whole idea of uncertainty. And when we approach it with a fixed mindset that I know how to deal with this because I've done something just like this in the past, you're lost because there is nothing. The fixed mindset is the wrong mindset to go into it with. And I know you were saying before, Vandana, about, going faster and being more agile sometimes isn't the way to respond to more and more things that are coming at you. At the same time, that agility to say everything I did before might be absolutely worthless in this particular case.
Yeah.
But that ability to, and I think a big part of this, and it's perhaps something I know Olivia's dealt with in the past, perhaps something we don't bring to the fore enough, is bias. How much do we allow our bias to creep in and actually stop us from having the mental agility to look around? And when we say, oh, be more mentally agile, do this more, be better at this, we're not explaining to people how do you do that. And a lot of the time they're clinging on to a previous life raft that always helped them, that is going to be no good to them in this situation.
Mm. It's interesting, actually, when you were talking about resilience. I think for a lot of people that comes back to the word of grit. If I just dig in more and stuff up more, I can get through this. And of course, that's where burnout lives. And my mental model of this is if you are just really gritting it out, your feet are together and you are tight. But actually, if you just relax, put your legs apart, relax your shoulders, you can roll with the punches so much better rather than being all hunched up and ready for the fight. So there is something about relaxing into it, which obviously is, sounds easy. It's super hard. But knowing you don't know is a very freeing thing. And I think that's quite a big step to make. But once you can make it, then you can relax about always being right about, everything I've learned will get me through the next phase. Maybe it won't. So maybe I need to rethink and bring in more resources or people. And again, I think for me, you say, what is strength as a leader? That to me is strength in a leader, someone who it isn't all about them. It's about them helping other people to get somewhere.
There is definitely a time, though, to be, a little bit contentious about this. When you feel in crisis, there is still a place for the command and control leader. And I'd love to know your thoughts on this, because no matter how much we're all into the authentic leader and all the Bill George stuff, which I totally love, there is also that space where everybody is panicking and everybody is stressed. And I want somebody who knows the answer to this. And sometimes I'm going to bluff it a little bit and pretend I've got the whole answer. Whereas I don't. I do feel sometimes I have to hold a little bit of space for people to exist within and do their job within. And perhaps I'm not telling them quite how scared I am of how much uncertainty there is at the top. So I'm always trying to balance these two. And I'm, people saying to me, yeah, but I get paid the big bucks. And I do constantly remind them of this as well. You get paid the big bucks because you handle the big stress and you deal with the big stuff. So at what point is there a place for a little bit of command and control? And at what point is this much more about the collaborative leader, do you think?
I think it's a great question, because but I think that I absolutely advocate the coaching skill set. And I will always say it isn't only about that. If the building's on fire, me asking you how you're feeling about inhaling smoke right now, is really not helpful. But I do need to know where the exit is. There's no point in me sending you further into the building. So I do think it's challenging when you're in a very uncertain space. How do you actually send people to the right door but when you know where the door is, you send them, and you send them quick. So I think it's a knotty problem. Sorry, Verdana, you were going to say something.
No, I agree with you 100%, Olivia. When the house is on fire, there's no time to sit and introspect. And I think it's a very, very valid point that you brought up, Melanie, because that's the crux of the issue, right? That whatever is the traditional leadership, it's not completely irrelevant or obsolete. There is a time and a place. And McKinsey talks about this a lot when it comes to organizations and teams, which is the skill or the muscle of future proofing, right? So how do you when the house is on fire is not the time to do all of the prep, but there is a prior to that, when you're not in a crisis, when you're not firefighting, there is a time to show vulnerability, to ask tough questions, which is also kind of the whole process of coaching as well, right? Like coaching in a crisis, and coaching in a more serene from a more serene headspace is going to bring up two very different kind of outcomes. So there's this case study that Netflix, Reed Hastings. So he's the CEO, and he asks his team, right? This question is, you may know about this, Melanie, it's quite famous. Is he asks his team this question, right? It's 10 years out, and we have failed, right? What went wrong? And this is a very difficult question to kind of ask. You have to be a little bit secure as a leader to say, well, let's poke holes, right? And there's variations of this in different companies that, like those kind of seminal case studies of, like let's destroy the business. Let's make ourselves obsolete. Let's do this exercise so that we can plan have a tangible grip on what are the risks that we face, so that 10 years down the line, we're not looking at a crisis situation. So I think the time when you are not in crisis is a time to kind of expand more into the future proofing, the readiness, the agility, planning together the next S curve is how McKinsey defines it. And the 100% is a time when things are more cutthroat, that you have to focus more on quick decision making. But to the point that you brought up earlier as well, Olivia, which is, if you're always in crisis, there's a problem, right? And I'm reading this. Mohit, you might experience this more working in India. There's a very intense culture of, if you're not busy, you're not valuable.
Yeah.
And this exists all the way through, from the top right down to the bottom. And when we talk about complexity, I'm reading this book by Sandra Dalton Smith. She's a doctor, and she talks about, the book is called Sacred Rest, and she talks about the 7 different kinds of rest. And the complexity in all the ways, in all the aspects of our lives, is also reflected in rest, right? There's 7 different types of rest that she identifies, which deal with 7 different kinds of potential burnout. so the way that we understand how we refuel, I think, is also part of this conversation somewhat.
So that brings me to the thought for 3 of you as to whether there is any go-to survival strategy for which you would like to recommend to the leaders, in which they can adopt in times of uncertainty and crisis.
It's a tough one, isn't it? I'm going back to the real basic stuff. I'm going to start with something really simple. A good friend and colleague of mine, Bahar Afrahi, Dr. Afrahi, starts every conversation with me, no matter how much trouble we're in, no matter how complicated the problem we're trying to solve. She says, "Stop. What have you done for yourself this week?" And I think leaders can do that for each other, and we need to do it ourselves. It's like, stop. Do you need to walk out in the garden a little bit? I don't know what kind of rest that one is, but I'm definitely going to take that book, Adana. So thank you so much for that. I think that's the big thing, is looking after ourselves first and foremost, equipping ourselves to be in, as Olivia says, that mind frame that is able to take it as it comes and give the best answer, rather than gritting in and trying to dig down a bit.
Vandana,
Yeah, no, I think that's 100% correct, in terms of, being able to take the time to slow down, not just because you'll just be tired and worn out otherwise, but because it has a direct impact as well on what the quality of your decision making, the quality of your interactions, and all of that. There's so much evidence that all of that actually touches the bottom line. So even if you don't really believe in self-care, and if it's too woo-woo for you, then here's another there's another interesting stat that in 2020, half of the companies that were listed on the Fortune 500 in 2000, half of the companies listed on Fortune 500 in 2000, they went bankrupt, they were acquired, they ceased to exist within the next 15 years, right? And so the idea of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, that is the story to kind of, that is the lesson against that, right? That complacency breeds a risk of you just trusting that you already know. And if you don't take a beat, even if it's to rest, even if it's to take a pause and to kind of reassess where you are, you're introducing the risk of complacency taking over instead of agility. If there's one thing, if there's a few things, okay, here are a few things that I would say leaders can look at, right? One is practice resilience. And there's a lot of specific ways to do that, but maybe the underlying thing is expect setbacks, find ways to accept it as part of the process. Don't consider that setbacks are a problem necessarily, right? That quote about pain at the start. Manage your energy is a big one. And also use data. There's such an influx of information. We live in the era of knowledge. All the knowledge is all around us, but there's so little wisdom. So I think creating the space to tap into what is the information that you actually need, that is something that is, I think, critical.
Olivia, your thoughts?
Oh gosh, this is going really big, and I'm trying to bring it back, and it keeps going really big. But I think, yeah, and maybe I'm just echoing what I've heard to a degree, but it's stuff I believe. It does start with self-care. If you're not okay, you can't lead anyone else, and you certainly can't have clarity around the business. Picking up what Vandana was saying before about, know where the fire exits are. So yes, scenario planning. There's really great data on how that works. And if you're not sometimes sitting back and having a chat at the water cooler about what are other people doing, what could happen, what are the trends that we aren't even noticing at the moment, but there are little signs of. If you don't do that, yes, you become a Kodak, a Blockbuster, Toys R Us. There are so many companies that have just not thought about what's happening next. And there are some beautiful examples of ones who are in completely different businesses, and some serially have to change business, like Nokia, but they can be agile. And I think that's very much the leader's role. And again, what does that have to do with being a boss versus a coach? It's being about curious. It's about being question-led and vulnerable to say, what if we haven't got it right? What if we don't know what's around the corner? What could we be doing? And asking those really big open questions that do make you sort of head thump, and staying with it. And again, getting lots of voices in. Because I think, again, if you we've just had International Women's Day and everyone's going, yay, there's 5 more women in the boardrooms now. Brilliant. However, how diverse are boardrooms? And not just by gender, but also by age and by background and socio-economic background and educational background, so that you're actually getting a whole load of people asking really annoying questions that you can then put your thoughts together as to how can we be better. So I do, as always, come back to, I think, that coaching skill set of looking after yourself, noticing all of the data that not just your head is giving you, but your heart and your gut, what is happening around there, being curious and being vulnerable and humble in saying, I don't know, but we can find out together. And yeah, back to that lovely analogy of let's figure out where the fire exits are.
So it was an insightful conversation, and I think we would have carried out more, but the clock is ticking fast, and we will have to conclude our show, but with a promise of picking up this topic once more with the same panel, and we'll deep dive further to see how can anyone sail through tough times and show the real leadership traits. I'm requesting my viewers to please do reach out to Vandana and Milene for anything you wish to seek guidance on, or if you are looking for a coach. Of course, Olivia is there. I can also help if you feel me considered. But yes, Vandana, Milene, they have made a mark for themselves and definitely to be reached out to. And also do pre-book Boss versus Coach. It's all about transforming yourself. It's all about mindset, and it's all about shifting your mindset to problems, and the problems becomes opportunity. I'm reminded of a quote from John F. Kennedy, which says that when written in Chinese, the word crisis denotes 2 characters. One represents danger, the other represents opportunity. So it's all about how do we want to see uncertainties and challenges, and rest is all the way forward. On that note, thank you very much. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Olivia, for taking time out for this show, and I look forward to having more. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks so much. Lovely conversation.
Thank you,
you
both
so
of you.
much.
Thank you.
Boss versus Coach series by Mohit has been a very transformative journey, not just for me, but for many leaders, I suppose. The people who really want to learn how they can be good leaders, how they can be more empathetic, more expressive, and more understanding, per se, by basically challenging the notion of command and control and shifting that notion to develop and then empower people. So it has been a beautiful journey, a beautiful series, and for all the people who really want to learn how leadership should look like, I would highly recommend this. I have been a part of this series myself in a discussion with Mohit and Olivia, and I enjoyed it very much. Thanks.